One aspect of building filter conditions in CSST that we've not covered in previous video clips is the use of relative dates. So we want to spend a few minutes talking about that today. We're going to do so in the context of the client's filter builder. However, keep in mind that the use of relative dates is available in all filter condition builders in CSST. And of course, all of those filter builders are available not only from the respective forms, like the client's form or the home energy form, for example, for the home energy filter builder, but also available from the report setup wizards that use those data sets. In the client's form, we get to the filter builder again by using the filters button. We go to custom selection criteria, and I'm going to click reset to clear out the current set of conditions that are there. For dates, we need to start out with looking at a date field, obviously, and in the clients table that we have selected here now, one of the most obvious dates will be the client's birth date. Dates, anytime any date field is selected, the default mode is absolute dates. In other words, you're going to type in this condition window the specific date that you're looking for, and that could be any date that you like, but that date is then stored, hard-coded if you will, stored with that filter condition set, and will always be that same date that you typed in regardless of when you run the report, even if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So that may be useful in some circumstances, and others maybe not so much. So you have the ability then to change that by simply clicking this little button that also appears whenever a date field is selected that says absolute. If you click it, it will change to relative. And then the syntax for putting in information about a relative date is available from the what's this help icon that appears just above that button when it's clicked to the relative. And you can read the pop-up what's this help box that comes up, but the general idea here is that you're going to start with a plus or a minus to indicate whether the date is greater than or less than or later than or earlier than a particular comparison date. Then it's followed by 3 digits, and it has to be 3 digits, so you will pad that out to the left with zeros. If it's 1, you would be 001. If it's 6, it would be 006, and so forth. And then a single letter. Let me pull that back up again. That can be either D for days, W for weeks, M for months, or Y for years. So if, for example, you wanted to create a list of clients who were under 5 years old as of today, and the comparison date, by the way, will always default to today's date, and that's indicated by this relative to drop-down list that appears whenever a relative date a date field is selected and it's set to relative as opposed to absolute. So the default condition in that drop-down list will be current date, meaning today's date whenever you apply the filter. So if you wanted a list of clients who were under 5 years old as of today's date, then you would want their birthday to be greater than or later than a particular date, and the condition then would be later than 5 years ago. So minus is 5 years earlier than today's date, 005Y. And we click add to list to put that in the conditions. We click apply, and we see the list of clients who fit that set of conditions. We click continue to apply it to the list, and then if you scroll up and down in the list of clients, you'll see that the birth dates are all earlier or later than, rather, 5 years prior to today's date. Now that kind of filtering can also be done using the between operator. So if we click back to no filter, recall the filter builder again, and we'll now set this to the comparison operator to between. And then you see that we're still in relative dates, and you get 2 windows here. So suppose you wanted to apply a filter to get all children who are between 3 and 5. In other words, eliminate those that are younger than 3 years old. So then it becomes between relative dates 5 years ago and relative date 3 years ago as of today's date. We can click edit the list and click apply, and that will give us that list, and click continue, and we see now the previous count was 50. We're now down to 43, so we've eliminated 7 youngsters in our test data set that were younger than 2 and therefore no longer fit in that set of conditions. Now you can use comparison dates other than today's date. So let's go back to the filter builder and take a look at that possibility. Suppose a scenario where you want to find out the list of all children who turned 5 in the previous calendar month, regardless of what month you're in now. Well, today happens to be in the month of December, so if I wanted to find out a list of children who turned 5 in the previous calendar month, in other words, in the month of November, I could do this. I could change the relative date to the first day of this month, and you see that we also have the choice of, besides the current date, which is today's date, the first day of this month and the last day of this month. So let's make it the first day of this month, and then in order to get only those children who turned 5 in a 1 month period, we have to change the years to months. So 5 years is 60 months, but we want the previous month, 1 month prior to the date that we're selecting, which would be the 1st of December in this case, since we're in the month of December. So we're going to make this minus 0.6, let's do it right, 61 months, and between that and minus 0.60 months. And we click edit to change the condition down here. We click apply, and we find that we have just one person. We can click continue, and we see that his birth date was 11/15/2008, which is the month of November 5 years ago from the current month of December of 2013. Now, one last useful feature in the use of relative dates is the fact that the comparison date, which can be, as we've already seen, today's date, the first day of today's month, or the last day of today's month, can also be other date fields within the same table. So we click off the current filter, click the filter builder to go back to our filter builder list, and take a look at the relative to date. And we see that the first 3 are the ones that we've already talked about, but then we also have other date fields within the same table. Now, there is a constraint here, and that is that the comparison date has to be another date field within the same table that you have selected up here. So you couldn't compare it, you couldn't use a date from another table like service delivery or something of that nature, but you can use other dates in the same table. Which can be quite useful. So suppose you have a scenario where you want to find out a list of all clients who have had a consent signed within 90 days of their birth date. So the way you would go about doing that is select the birth date the way we have already, and then we're going to say the birth date is greater than, meaning it's later than 90 days prior to the consent signed date. So in the relative to, we want to choose that date consent signed, and then we want to make the relative date minus 0.90 days, D for days, and we'll click edit list to add those constraints. Now, if the date that the consent signed is empty, that date is earlier than any possible non-empty date. So in this case, any birth date that's greater than an empty date would appear in these filter conditions. So in order to make this useful to you and not get a list of all of those where the date consent signed has just not been entered, you need to add a second condition. So we're going to change this to date consent signed, and then just say is not empty, and add that to the conditions list. So now we have a set of conditions where the birth date is greater than 90 days prior to the date that the consent was signed, and the date the consent signed is not empty. So we click apply. We get 3 clients in our test data set that meet those conditions. We click continue, and we see those 3 clients. And just as an example, if we take a look at the consents and assignments page, notice the birth date up here is 1/28, January 28th of 2002, and the date that the consent was signed, which is this date field, is April 26th of 2002, therefore falling within that 90-day restriction. So that gives you several examples of ways that you can use relative dates in a fairly powerful way to build filter conditions on your clients table, and again keeping in mind that those same capabilities exist in all of the other filter builders in CSST as well.